Thank you. My name is Rob Hamilton. I'm from Foundations of Genesis in Idaho, and my wife Liz next door talking over the books. Those books in there are for donation only, so if you want to pick something up, if you'll read it, and you don't have any money, just go ahead. If you want to donate, we'd love to have it. Other than that, and we'll go through, and he'll do the talk, and then we'll pass the plastic buckets around and see if we can afford to, pay for his stay. So, and his flights out. Our speaker today is John Rajca, and he's been he worked in RCI museum for 20 years, so he's got lots of fun stories. And with that, I'll give it to him because he talks better than I do. Oh, and if you're interested, there's still some more, 2 more days of where we're going to different places if you're interested in showing up. So, with that, John.
All right. Said my name is John Rajca. Is it on? It's on. Yeah, I used to be the director of the Museum of Creation and Earth History at the Institute for Creation Research when they were in California. In about 2008, they moved to Dallas, Texas, and that's where they're located now. I wasn't able to go with them for various reasons, and so I'm not the director of the museum anymore. Okay, I guess. All right. My time in the museum was fun. I took it from a little museum to a big museum. We were able to go through several things, and I tried to help along with that. I also had some interesting guests. As I mentioned earlier when I talked today, we had the American Atheist Association through the museum, gave them a tour. That was fun. We had PBS, CBS come through, especially in the 80s, because creationism was a hot topic, and we were the sort of the big dog on the block kind of a thing. I've had people from other planets through the museum. Yeah, all right. Yeah, it's true. They said they were. And we had some fun with that, and all kinds of interesting folks. I mentioned, we had one lady through, I remember she was very well dressed. She had read most of the museum, in there about an hour or so. And she turns to me and like a revelation happened. Oh, you guys are reality based. Yeah, that was my reaction. What? All right. Isn't everybody reality based? No. I learned that wasn't true. You can create reality in your head. Now you can do that, but it's not going to go so well for you. All right. And I noticed a couple of things. Our realities converged when she walked down the hall out of the museum. All right. She got in her car and I still saw her. So our realities were, in a lot of places the same. Okay. But it was just a remarkable statement. My first impulse almost was to, slap her. All right. What are you talking about? That's nonsense talk. All right. But I realized, and this was in the early 90s, I guess, a lot of people started talking like that, gender is a social construct in your head or something like that. Really? Okay. People were really confused, and it was like, well, open your shirt. What does it look like? That's who you are, all right? But anyway, all right. So I had a lot of interesting conversations. I've got all kinds of stuff. But today we're going to talk about the world before the flood and the importance of CO2. Now, you've heard about CO2 in the news probably. We're trying to get rid of it. It's the poison gas that's going to kill the planet. And when I first started hearing that, my antenna went up a little bit, because CO2, well, if you guys, some of you are probably farmers or familiar with it, that's plant food, okay? They like that kind of thing, all right? And God made the world, and I just didn't think he would poison it, all right? It didn't seem right. It smelled like something else was going on, and we're going to talk about that today and try and figure that out. All right, the world before the... Now, this was a talk I delivered at the Creation Research Society meeting a couple of years ago. All right, so it was meant to be sort of a scientific talk, if you will. And I've tried to cut it down a lot, and if I see everybody going, I'm going to try and explain that or go on to the next slide real quick. Okay? But this is important from a Christian perspective. Again, it's sort of like CO2's in the world, it's destroying the world. God didn't make it right, or something like that. And that's just not true, okay? All right, let's go. Let's start with the days of creation. Little Genesis 1 refresher course here. What did God make on day 1? Well, he made matter, day and night, and some even folks, based on 104 Psalms, say that this is when angels were created. All right, because angels were meant as servants, to go back and forth. And they sang together at creation, all right? And before God made anything, like the universe, on day 1, there wasn't anything, okay? God doesn't need to hang out in a place, okay, because of his nature. All right, day 2, the atmosphere is created and a shoreless ocean. And that less should be connected to shore, sorry. All right, shoreless. In other words, he said, put water around the planet, okay? It's just the way it is. No, there we go. On day 3, land appeared, okay? And we have some strata in the bottom of the Grand Canyon that looks like it's perfect for fossilization, but there's no animals in it. We think this might have been made on day 3, when God divided the waters and the dry land appear. Some of the stuff got washed around and layered, okay? And plants. There we go. Now, some creationists hypothesize that the kind of plants that were out there might have been around the edge of the continent. Creationists, at least some of the latest thinking, says that all the continents were together, just like the evolutionists. We think they split apart quickly at the time of Noah's flood. Not continental drift, but more continental sprint, all right? And that around the edges of all the continents might have been a floating forest, okay? Because the planet plants we find buried in the fossil record are very interesting. We'll talk about some of these as we go along. A lot of these are extinct. Some of them seem to have a hollow trunks to them, okay? It's kind of weird, and so we think maybe that was surrounding the edge. Now, we don't have pictures, but we have the fossils to look at. And when God has his creation course, and when we get to heaven, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see what's there, all right? All right. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars created. Now, this is some of the problems of the Big Bang, because, of course, the sun and the moon and all that, or the sun at least, came before the earth, and so did the stars. We kind of, came off of that. It's not how the Bible talks about it. And, well, we could talk here a little bit about Big Bang problem, missing mass, missing antimatter, missing time. There's all kinds of interesting things there. But God made the stars back, what was there? Uh-oh, did I say something wrong? Okay. And starlight and time, how God made the universe to beginning. We think it's about 40 billion light years across right now. No, yeah, 40 billion, something like that. And, that's pretty big. God's, all right, a light year is 6 trillion miles. So, 40 billion times 6 trillion, that's a big number, all right? You better take enough gas to get around there, okay? And that's all we can see right now. It might be bigger than that, all right? And it seems to say in the Bible, God sort of stretched out the universe, all right? Now again, those are the videos I want to see when I get to heaven. All right, on day 5, the marine life is created. Fishies. I think that includes things like plesiosaurs and the mosasaurs. If you watched any of the Jurassic Park movies, they got a nice one that comes up like a porpoise and grabs, this kind of a thing. Some of these babies were pretty big, 50, 60 feet, okay, jaws 10 feet long. And so sharks were hunted, before all this. Ichthyosaurs, they're not around anymore. All kinds of interesting things we think were made on day 5. Okay? Also on day 5, the flying things. So you recognize some of those birds, all right? Some of these you might not recognize. Those are pterosaurs. This is a rhamphorhynchoid. He's got that cute little tail. Some of them weren't really big. This is a common pterosaur. This is Catacodylus. all right, named after one of the gods in Mexico, because that's where a lot of paleontologists are sort of going. This thing was as big as an aircraft, maybe 47 feet across in wingspan. All right, so when he came across the sky, shadows, all right? Yeah, baby. And you don't want to be under him, I guess, when he took off. All right. Land animals on day 6. All right. We've got man and woman, all the other land animals, sheep, and of course, I think these guys were created on day 6. And we can talk about that later on if you want. And we were given the dominion mandate. No. Dominion mandate. There we go. All right. It's been a long day. All right. And that was a really nice dinner we went to. Okay. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. All right. God never stopped that either. You know, you don't go to the book of Revelation. They're still having children, it seems, even in the millennium. All right. And so we keep doing that, and that's a good thing. The dominion mandate also said that we were sort of be the caretakers of the earth. And this is where I think this has gone off track now, and we'll talk about this today. And of course, man and woman were created. And no, just man and woman, all right? There's just two. All right, there's been a lot of confusion about that lately, too. In fact, that one group, I think it was out of, not Stanford, another university, I think back east, said there were 55 genders, all right? Yeah, that's after a lot of bad pizza late at night. I mean, there's no way there's 55 genders, all right? I don't know how you come, I go, okay, I can maybe do 5, maybe, but that's not even real. No, it's not real. No, it's not real. I'm just kidding, all right? I can't imagine what 50, well, I can because I read the paper and it was like, oh, okay, let's go. All right. Day 6, God rested. Now, I'm not saying God is female. That's just a nice picture I picked with somebody in a hammock, all right? So I don't get in trouble there. 6 days share labor, it says in Exodus. 7th day, don't do any work. For in 6 days the Lord God made heaven and earth and the sea and all them in it is, and rested on the 7th. And basically it was sort of, so also should you, all right? And that's what we do today. Now, some people have tried to change that. For instance, during the French Revolution, they went to 14-day weeks, okay? It didn't go so well. The Soviet Union tried to change that. That didn't go so well. It seems like the Sabbath, like it says in the Bible, was made for man, or 1 day a week of rest. Now, you know yourself, if you push it, you can do it. But then all of a sudden, you know, you crash a little bit, right? So, yeah, don't do that. All right, so we got the 7 days. We got it all down, right? All right. It was man's disobedience that introduced death into the world. This is the next big thing, the fall of man and woman, by the way. All right. The death was both physical, we would suggest, and spiritual. This is a big sticking point with some. Some believe that evolution is the way God did it, and things have been dying for millions of years. Others of us say, well, wait a minute. No, that doesn't make sense, because that's when death came into view. And I can do a couple more lectures on that, I guess. This is an interesting question we always get. Well, if everything, you know, was given plants to eat, isn't that death? All right. Well, it turns out when you look closely at the words, the nephesh, plants don't die in the same way animals do. They wither and fade. That's why you can take a cutting of a plant and, you know, put it here and there and all that. It's really hard to do that with animals, all right? Okay, this is just rationalization here, all right? And, you know, when you cut up your carrots to have a good meal, you don't hear screams, right? Yeah, and if you do, you know, you need to talk to somebody about that. So animals aren't alive in the same way. These they wither and fade, and we do that. So it's not death in the same way. It's just sort of a stop of functioning, okay? That's how the Bible talks about it. I can refer you to some other literature that goes deeper into that. All right. These are some of the critters that seem to be before the flood. All right. Now, this is a stylized thing because evolutionists say there's a period when these animals dominated, then, you know, the age of the dinosaurs. You know, nothing else was around. The dinosaurs were, you know, kind of a thing. And so this is a This is actually up in the Field Museum in Chicago, one of my favorite places to go when I was a kid, all right, showing things, all right. These dragonflies back then got pretty big, and we'll talk about that a little bit. This is a fossil millipede, okay? These things are 6, 7 feet long and about a foot wide. You could hear them coming, all right? Right? And maybe you could ride those. That's what I would try and do. But anyway, all right, now we have some big ones today, but it seems like before the flood, these babies were super huge, all right? Wow, what's going on? Giant dragonflies of the ancient world, or before the flood, had a wingspan of 28 inches, all right? Again, you can hear that coming. And you didn't use a fly swatter, a baseball bat would have probably been more appropriate, right? Right? Okay? And they say that this is attributed to higher oxygen levels in the atmosphere in the past. All right, that was my first clue. I started on stuff. Higher oxygen levels. Now, they get this by what they call proxy data. They look at some other things and seem to suggest, okay, this is how much oxygen was in the atmosphere at the time. Okay, so you're going to follow my reasoning here. If it's any good even. Why so big? Good night. A 28-inch dragonfly? What does that do? Now remember, before the flood, everything was eating plants. So you didn't have to worry about that attacking you necessarily, all right? Now they do. Dragonflies are amazing. They can fly backwards. They can catch other insects in midair, okay? And all they got is a little bug brain, all right? But it seems to be, yeah, right, okay? It seems to be a very good brain, all right? And again, we know it's not how big your brain is, but maybe how much you use it. That's important, all right? These are some of the things that used to be in the past. Well, these are some that are now. This guy's standing in giant equisetum. Some of you might be familiar with equisetum. If you get it in your garden or something, it's almost impossible to get out. It's like jointed stems, and they're kind of hollow, all right? These are some of the things that we see. We're going to talk more about that one in a minute. Okay, so some of them get really big today. Okay, they're fascinating plants. They're called horsetails. You guys, horsetails now? Yeah, all right. We've got some farmers here. We must. Okay, you guys know what this is. All right? You haven't seen some this size, but all right. In the past, they seem to have gotten a lot bigger. Let me go to that next slide. Okay, now what's interesting is this is from a secular book, but man, that looks like Adam and Eve, all right? It doesn't look like they have clothes on, all right? And this is how big some of this stuff gets. These are these floating forest kind of things I was talking about. Some of these things are huge, all right? And they're not around anymore for the most part. All right. This is that world before the flood I was talking about. So it's hard to reconstruct things after after a disaster like the flood, okay? We're basically looking at a worldwide murder scene, all right? CSI on steroids, okay? Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, they do, okay? And in fact, that's where you can get some of these ideas. Now, think of that on a larger scale is what I'm thinking of, maybe, all right? Again, we're just finding dead stuff in the ground. The paleontologist has to sort of reconstruct it. There's only a few Christian paleontologists, and so we're putting ideas forward, but, having to work through that and all that. But there might be a way to confirm some of this, and we're getting to that. Ooh. All right. This is an evolutionary chart. I do not believe in the millions of years here. I want you to look at just a couple of things. In the past, this is the CO2 in the atmosphere. Looks like a lot more, doesn't it? Ooh, okay, so, this is not rocket science. And as we come down to today, wow, it looks like a lot less, doesn't it? Okay, now before the flood, it seems like we had lots of plants. Now we have plants, but it seems like there was a lot more. What do plants like to eat? CO2, all right? You're kind of getting where we're going here, all right? by the way, CO2 and temperature are supposed to be related. Look at this. Now, I don't believe this is millions of years. In fact, what I think is this is where the flood ended. All this would probably be pre-flood. Is this what's in the atmosphere, or is it something else? Okay, look at this diagram. This is a gentleman. He was in Arizona. He liked to do experimentation. This is ambient carbon dioxide, 400 or so parts per million. Okay, 150, 300, 450 parts per million. He's kicking it up. Same trees, different parts per million. Look at that. Same age. Ooh, plants grow bigger and faster when you give them more carbon dioxide. Now, some of you have greenhouses, you know this is true. Greenhouse people kick carbon dioxide into there, sometimes up to 1,500 parts per million, all right? Now, remember, this 400 parts per million everybody's scared about, and if we go much higher, we're all gonna choke and die, is the sort of rhetoric you get of all this. Look at this, huh? Fascinating, isn't it? All right. Let's see. This is, like I said, in greenhouses. They usually raise it up to about here. Some of the literature I was reading said, you know, if you go beyond that, you might kill the plants. But there's nothing that says this will kill it, all right? So I said, wonder what the limits are to all this. Has anybody done any experiments on this kind of thing? What is the limits of CO2 tolerance? All right, according to research from the false Homo erectus, currently dated to between 2.1 and 8.1 million years ago, they have lived in a low carbon dioxide environment. Concentrations were less than 320 parts per million. So as we're adding it up, this person says, you know, we've never had this since the time of Homo habilis or erectus. Okay, we do this more, we're going to kill ourselves. Is that true? Let's see. This is an interesting paper I came across. This is the sea view, if you remember the old Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Yeah, okay, I can see some nods. All right, I love that program, except it got kind of weird. All right, and this person, they did experiments. Submariners routinely operate with higher levels of ambient carbon dioxide, between 2,000 and 5,000 parts per million. All right, so right there, we already going, that's a lot more than we have now, isn't it? All right, that what was typically considered normal was 400 to 600, but these guys are doing it. All right, submarines, you know, you don't get a lot of air breathing. You have lithium scrubbers and all that in there, and you got a lot more carbon dioxide. All right, let's go. What they did in this survey, these scientists, they took submariners and they did double-blind experiments, all right, and they put the sailors to receive 3 different CO2 exposures: 600, 2,500, 15,000 parts per million. All right, they should all be on the ground going, right? All right. Oops, I said it backwards, didn't I? All right. I'd like to be in a submarine, all right, with this kind of thing. Then what they did is after they got them acclimated for 45 minutes, they had them do a computer test, 80 minutes of sort of cognitive stuff, you know, how your brain functions and all this. I bet you're interested in the results, aren't you? So am I. I'm looking at this paper going, what? Okay, here's the results. Now, it may be a little complex. I'll explain it to you. These are the different things they focused on in these tests, all right? And this is the score they got, all right? So say it's from 1 to 100. At 600 parts per million, they did 89%. At 2,500 parts per million, 83 they got in their tests. At 15,000 parts per million, they have an 89. Whoa, what's going on there? This should put them on the floor, you would think, right? Gasping for air, all right? If you look all the way across, it's like that same thing. It might be a little lower, but it comes around the same thing. So what did this indicate to the people that did it? There were no significant differences for any of the 9 measured decision-making parts between the levels of CO2 exposure. All right? So this thing about we're all going to die when it hits 500 parts per million, or, it's going to get difficult for life, doesn't seem to be true, at least when it relates to humans. Now, maybe you'll kill off all the plants, right? All right, let's keep going. There were other reports I came across. Levels of, crops responded to levels of carbon dioxide ranging from 20,000 to 30,000 parts per million. Looks like plants really love carbon dioxide, okay? The tomato plants is what was in this. Now, that's not them, okay? I don't believe, all right? I just got some pictures of some really big tomatoes. I'm not sure what they did to those, all right? This is in the Creation Research Society Quarterly in 1994. Oh, and botany, that's right. All right, hang on. Okay, so interesting. Another little interesting piece to understand, all right? Like I mentioned before, CO2 is not poison, it is plant food. It also seems to indicate that oxygen levels were higher in the past. Remember those dragonflies? It said the reason they got so big is because of increased oxygen. So here you got more oxygen, you got more CO2, and this is not us saying this, those crazy creationists. This is what's in the literature based on what they're talking about. CO2 were higher in the past. All right. Now, this is just a personal anecdote. My mom used to talk to plants, all right? There was that whole time they said, if you talk to plants, they'll grow better and all that. I told Mom, we're going to put you away if you keep doing this kind of thing, all right? But it turns out when you talk to plants, it's not the sound, it's the amount of carbon dioxide coming out your mouth, all right? You exhale about 40,000 parts per million on these poor plants, all right? And what's that do? It's like throwing food at them, okay? They did grow better, but it wasn't because of your talk, it was because of your gas, all right? There's got to be a song in there, yeah. All right? So when you stand close to do that, that's sort of funny, isn't it? I didn't realize that. Now, this is from a good book, if you want to get it, by Patrick Moore, Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom, all right? It's a real fun-looking book, too. Now, Patrick Moore is an interesting character. He was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, all right? And he was into it, okay? They were doing all kinds of stuff, And then about in the mid-'80s or early '80s, they said chlorine gas is a disaster and we need to outlaw it, okay? And he said, wait a minute, chlorine is an element. You just can't say, no, you can't have it. And that's when he parted ways. And now he's a big thorn in everybody's flesh because he's got the PhD in ecology and all that to prove it. And he's coming across stuff like this, all right? He's written whole books on this. They hate his guts, all right? But he's right. He's smart enough and he's going against them. But that's when you get blasted. He is not a Christian, but he says some very interesting things, okay? And again, with the exhale thing, Mom was right, all right? Okay, 55 benefits of carbon dioxide enrichment. Now, this is from that site where those trees were that I showed you that had different carbon dioxide. This is a website. He's got all this stuff on there. I'm going to list them all real quickly. They're all there, but I'm just going to look at the white ones, all right? I'm not being prejudiced. It's just the way I did this, okay? So everybody just calm down. Carbon dioxide sequestration, or, we want to put it all in the ground. It turns out increased CO2 is better for that. Earthworms. Okay, I know you may not think they're a big idea, but earthworms do a lot of stuff. All right? Nectar, progressive nitrogen limitation, and weeds. We'll just look at a few of these, all right? You can see all the others on there. Go to the website, learn more about it, all right? Carbon dioxide sequestration. Rising CO2, atmospheric CO2 leads to more and numerous robust plants which yearly remove even greater quantities of CO2-derived carbon from the atmosphere, and they store them. So you really want to get rid of carbon dioxide? Grow more plants, all right? And when they get higher like that, they take more out. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like somebody designed that. All right. Earthworms respond to increased CO2 via the number of plant-mediated phenomenon. All right. in ways further enhance the positive effects of atmospheric CO2 in plant growth, while at the same time helping sequester more carbon dioxide. In other words, they help the plants to grow better, it seems, and they sequester carbon dioxide. What do you know? There seems to be a system that's designed with earthworms. Oh, wow. All right. Nectar. Greater concentrations of CO2 tend to boost nectar production in flowers, which improves the attractiveness of the flowers to bees and other pollinators. And, you know, you guys know about pollinators and how you need them for some of the crops, right? Nitrogen fixation increases atmospheric CO2, stimulates nitrogen fixation in plants, and this allows them to grow better. The bacteria in the soil are supported. Okay, isn't it amazing? It looks like, man, a lot of this stuff is really important, huh? All right. Yes, sir. Maybe. Weeds, yeah. We'll get to that in the last one, I promise. All right, because that's a big one, I think. All right. Well, just let me get there. All right. Water efficiency use. Now, it turns out when you increase the CO2, there's little things on the side of plants. If you're familiar with plants, you know, stomata that open up, you know, and respiration and all that. Well, it turns out plants become more water efficient with higher CO2. All right. They don't need as many stomata, so it takes less water to keep them alive, even though they grow bigger. All right, it seems. Fascinating, isn't it? All right, it's almost like it was made that way. What do you know? Weeds. Elevated CO2 typically stimulates the growth of all plants, including weeds. Fortunately, the results of several studies suggest that the ongoing rise in CO2 will likely not favor the growth of weedy species over that of crops. In fact, it may well provide non-weed species greater protection against weed-induced diseases, productivity, and growth. How about that, huh? Interesting, all right? It means that increased CO2 might help the healthy plants to grow bigger and the weeds not to grow so big. And it might protect them from all the stuff that weeds might do to them. Now, I'm not familiar with weed diseases, okay, and stuff like that, but I'm not a farmer. I'm a city slicker, all right? I don't know anything almost. My study was reptiles and paleontology. But look at how this is. Plants are very important, of course, for animals to eat on, for us to eat on, and all these things. All right, go ahead. I think it would have a detrimental effect on life on Earth, all right? I think we need carbon. For goodness sakes, we're carbon-based too, all right? But I think if we try to do this, it's the opposite maybe we should try to do. Remember that graph I showed you, that high CO2s in the past? If that's from the time before the flood, they had a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. Now, they had a lot of oxygen too, and that probably, and we'll get to this, increased the pressure, which we know hyperbaric pressures we use sometimes in healing, all right? Things seem to work better when you got more oomph to shove it in there, all right? Right? I think we're carbon starving right now as far as plants go. And in fact, as we've increased CO2 over the last 100 years or so, it looks like we've been having a bloom in various forests and things around the world, all right? More CO2, oh, we love it, okay? This kind of thing. Go ahead. I think it will create plants that need more water, okay? And so if you only have a limited supply of water, those plants are going to die. If you increase the CO2, they seem to be more drought tolerant. Who would have guessed that, all right? You know, people who know plants probably would know more about that. That's very interesting. Now, again, I'm just a guy who's studying this. My training is in biology, and I tried to sort of follow this forward. Let me go forward now. All right. Here's some more of the benefits. Increased growth and yield. All right. This is sort of what I said before, but It allows the plants to produce more biomass with the same amount of energy. How would you like that in your corn crops or whatever? All right? Photosynthetic enhancement. Water use efficiency, this is what I'm talking about. Better nutrient efficiency use. In other words, what fertilizer you put on them, they'll uptake it better. All right, how about that? More resistance to plants and disease. All right, and shorter crop cycles. In other words, you might be able to grow them faster and taller and harvest more. Now, I used to live in Southern California, and out in the desert there, they have real good conditions. They have soil and they have heat all the time. So they have 3 growing seasons, all right? And I thought, I went out to talk there once. I thought this is just a bunch of farmers, kind of thing. I'm a city slicker. What do I know, all right? And it turns out, no, these guys had everything on computer when I started talking to them. And there's certain times of the year they put plastic over the whole thing and then peel it back, all right? I understood that this was to efficiency for plant growth and all that kind of thing. Fascinating to me, all right? Shorter crop cycles, wouldn't you like that, huh? You could get more harvest maybe? Oh, baby. Yes, sir. I'm not sure. I think it's mostly coming from the atmosphere. Now, I don't know. Do people do that? I mean, some of the fertilizers that you use, do they have a type of carbon in them that helps that? I don't know. I don't think so. All right? But it's the atmosphere. Okay? Fascinating. All right.
Well, when you manure crops, you're putting carbon in there.
Okay.
Cow manure is full of carbon.
All right. There you go. Why would you do that? What does that do?
It makes your crops grow better.
What do you know? Oh, man. All right. Okay. This isn't, well, it might be rocket science because, I mean, this stuff is pretty complex chemistry. All right. But look at that. Isn't that amazing? Some of you guys have been using this all along. So when these people start talking about that, one, I don't care if you've got a PhD, you might not know what you're talking about. All right. Or you might have an agenda, let's say. All right, can plants die from breathing too much carbon dioxide? A Canadian study said that the average CO2 toxicity level for a plant is around 10,000 ppms, 10,000 parts per million. That's still a lot less than we do, all right? So it's going to take a long time for it to cause damage. And I'm suggesting you some of those other things I talked about, like the plants that were grown in 20 to 30,000 parts per million, I'd question this, all right? Okay, this is some of my rampant speculation. Proxy data suggests that both CO2 and O2 levels were higher in the past, perhaps radically higher. Could this be from a catastrophic plant, or the catastrophic nature of the flood? In other words, all these are plant screams, carbon dioxide. Maybe, all right? Or could this be that this was the atmosphere before the flood? All right? Now, here's an interesting little tidbit. According to Josephus, a historian who lived around the time of Christ, he's got this book that he's written about the earliest chapters of Genesis even and all the way through. He said the reason the people lived back then longer was because they ate better. All right? All right. Now, if your plants are more efficient, have more stuff in them, and you're living in this atmosphere that's hyperbaric, you might live longer, right? All right. Now, I don't know if this is true. This is just me passing gas or whatever. Okay.
How do you know what the CO2 levels were?
They use what they call proxy data. You can look at various places where oxygen is trapped, perhaps. To be honest, I haven't studied that out, but it's proxy. Just like when we look at global warming and global temperatures, we can go back a ways. For instance, for a long time, we knew there was a medieval warm period. They were growing grapes in England, okay? And don't do that so good right now, okay? And then towards the time of the Revolutionary War, we dropped into a mini ice age. You can read about how hard it was at the Valley Forge and some of these things. okay? And we've been slowly, since about the 1880s, coming out of what they call the Little Ice Age. Should it get warmer? Maybe so. They asked Vladimir Putin about this. He said, man, global warming, I'd sure love that, because half his country is covered in permafrost, all right? All right. Further rampant speculations. Would the pre-flood atmosphere have increased pressure? This is what I sort of hinted at before. You got higher concentrations of oxygen, higher concentrations of CO2. When you put more stuff in the same place, it would seem maybe it kicks up the pressure, right? Can we get better understanding of the pre-flood atmosphere through simulations? Simulations of the plant life, perhaps. Here's where I'm going with this. This is just a commercial. This plant is on Kilimanjaro, that mountain in the middle of Africa, the volcano. Look at this thing. Ever seen anything like that? It's called a groundsel. All right? It's got all kinds of interesting things about it. When I come across something amazing again, all right, look at that. That's cool. Anyway. All right, little brain break so you can sort of let all this stuff sort of seep in. All right, let's go. Oh, yes, amazing design. All right, so here we go. How can we test these theories? What it was like before the flood. Now, a lot of times we've been looking at fossils and the geology, and that's good. But maybe we can take living animals and try and place them in the environment that we think was before the flood. Maybe higher O2, maybe higher carbon dioxide, increased pressure. All right, and here are some of the candidates. Equisetum. One of you guys gets a greenhouse going, just cut off a little bit of it and kick the CO2 way up maybe, all right? Or slowly grit. Now I know that's going to be expensive, but boy, it'd be interesting to get some of these giant calamites that we see in the fossil record. Dragonflies, cockroaches, cycads. These are real pretty plants, especially when I was living in California. Everybody wanted one of these. They're super expensive. They're very slow growing. Another hint, hint, hint. Okay? If we could take one of these, put it in high CO2, okay? Because CO2 makes things grow bigger and faster. All right, this might be a way to fund the research. All right, yeah, baby. You can pop one of these babies off in a year, get a giant one, send it off, and boom, keep going. All right. All right, they have sharp edges, they're slow growing, they're very expensive. Some of these look pretty good, and it looks like he's growing it in some kind of greenhouse here. We'll see. I know they kick the CO2 up in greenhouses, but it might be you can slowly raise a series of plants, generations of it, in higher and higher levels of CO2. Now, the problem is if you take them out of that environment, what would happen to them? Would they die? I don't know. All right? Okay, so here's what I'm saying. Let's do his experiment. Whoops. His experiment with these plants. All right? This is at the Ark Encounter where I live near. Okay, they have these greenhouses there. They grow a lot of the plants in the greenhouses annually. And when I was delivering this is where this conference was. And so I suggested, well, maybe we should take one of these greenhouses and give it a shot, see what we could do with it. There's lots of ways to raise CO2, okay? Here's another experiment. This was done with Drosophila melanogaster. You know what that is, right? That's fruit flies. All right. Fruit flies and populations were growing in hyperoxygenous things. And it turns out because they were grown there, they were many times larger, okay, than the other flies around. Oh, that's interesting. All right. Isn't that fun? Okay. All right. Some of these mealworms, these are apparently grown. That's what the scientific name is. These were grown in hyperoxygen. This one is bigger than this one, all right? See, one of these things is not like the other. All right, this is easy stuff. All right, let's be the first to grow giant bugs. Let's start with there. All right, now I thought this was a real novel idea until I found this guy. Biologists have grown supersized dragonflies, 15% larger than normal, by raising the insect start to finish in an oxygen atmosphere conditions 300 million years ago. In other words, elevated conditions. All right? Now, it was a lot of fun. This was in a PhD thesis, so I haven't been able to gain access to the whole thing. And so I've been looking at papers around, kind of. All right? They explore the effects of it. These team raised 11 other living fossils, including beetles, roaches, all that kind of stuff, in higher oxygen. How about that? Well, you know, cockroaches, you know, there's some in the tropics that are pretty big. You put that under, oh, baby, you're going to have something that comes, grabs your fruit, and takes it with them. Okay? Oh, now, this is the fun part. It wasn't easy, but it paid off. He said, we had to raise the critters in the lab, adding that 225 nymphs. You'd need to be hand-fed worms and guppies every day for almost a half a year. All right? So you're hand-feeding dragonfly nymphs. Now, this is what graduate students do, all right? Yeah, you go out there, feed those nymphs. Yes, sir. You want me to sign off on that paper? Go feed some nymphs, you know, that kind of thing. All right? But in the end, they were big, all right? The dragonflies were 15% larger, 4-inch wingspans. All right, now that doesn't seem, but it's larger than normal, okay? This is the first step. How high his oxygen levels and all that were, it's kind of, I couldn't get it from it. Now, he might want to be keeping that a little bit close to his vest, too, because he's got some surprises in there, and he's been wanting to do future research, okay? Isn't that interesting? All right, remember how big they were in the fossil record? 27 inches across. What kind of oxygen levels would support that? All right. This is his PhD thesis at Yale University. You can get them through the mail. I just haven't had the opportunity, and it's probably costs a little bit too. All right? What would be the mechanism to increase the amount of atmosphere or oxygen in the atmosphere in the pre-flood world? Well, it might be one, the way God made it, and the way you keep this cycle going is with, because plants like carbon dioxide. What do plants breathe out? Oxygen. Isn't that amazing how that cycle goes? Wow. You would think somebody designed, oh yeah. All right. What is the mechanism of carbon dioxide? Us. Plants and animals and bugs. All right, so here you go. Let's get some big boys. These are actually existent. I used to have some. These are from South America. They don't really fly so much, but they're pretty big. These are the famous Madagascar hissing cockroaches. You know, this is what they use on all those shows where they got to eat a bug or something, okay? These things are cool. The males have horns here. The females don't, but when you touch them, they blow out air, and so you get when you touch them, okay? That made them even more creepy when I had them in the museum and I was showing the kids these things, all right? They're fun. You can buy these now, all right? I had some for a long time. In fact, when I worked in the museum one night, I came home, my wife and I are watching TV, and all of a sudden I see this thing crawling slowly up the wall, all right? And I'm over there, wow, that's a fairly large for a cockroach. That's not a native species. Now I'm sitting here thinking this. And then I realized what happened. I dropped one of these babies on my pants, and it escaped and started going up my wall. My wife doesn't really care for cockroaches. So I had to grab it and put it back in the cage, all right? I'm sorry, honey. I didn't know. I didn't know he was hitchhiking home. Got in trouble for, oh, that's a beautiful animal. You see how it's segmented like? No. Somehow that doesn't go over, all right? CO2 would sink to the ground, too, while O2 would be higher. All right, look at this. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air. Therefore, distribution systems should maintain enough turbulence, this is greenhouse management, to keep the added carbon dioxide evenly mixed in the greenhouse air. Okay, this is interesting because some of the insects didn't like increased oxygen. They did better, perhaps, with CO2. Where do cockroaches like to live? On the ground. Where do dragonflies like to live? In the air. Isn't that amazing, huh? There might be something to that. That needs to be explored a little bit further. All right? Stratified ground level could explain how plants have higher CO2 levels and animals would have higher O2 levels, and they would both be happy. Okay? Isn't that? Now, again, this is all kind of rampant speculation, but it doesn't seem to be too far-fetched. I don't seem to be over the edge. So is CO2 a good thing? For plants, it's amazing, all right? And if we get more plants, we get more animals, we get more oxygen. It almost seems like right now we're sort of getting ready to change the nature of the earth, okay? Now we know the millennium's coming. I don't know if that's what God's plan is, all right? But right now, everybody is scared to death of CO2. We're trying to dump it in the oceans, put it on. And I think maybe we should do just the opposite. If it's better for crops, man, farmers should be screaming out there, yeah, CO2, CO2, you know, that kind of, I don't know, right? Now, this group, this on science, they actually have a way to experiment with this stuff for you homeschooler types, okay? And how to grow it, how to put it in a fish tank, grow it up, see if you can get those plants growing faster. We need to maybe put this on another level. They actually have a place where you can record it. He's looking for people who will do it at different art and what the results are, all right? This is fascinating. All right, start with, you know, anything that can fit in an aquarium, find fossil ancestors. Another thing we might want, you know what's really slow growing? Cactus, huh? What if we put those in hyperbaric? What would happen? I don't know. But you know, if you like a little cactus garden aquarium and you can somehow crank up the CO2, see what happens. Ooh, this would be fun. All right, nerd fun anyway. Now, some plants are pretty big, so aquariums are not going to work. This was, I did this talk, I said, like the Ark, and one of the things I have is right in the middle of the Ark there. It's open for 3 stories. I figured, you know, we seal that off a little bit, dump some carbon in there, we can get some pretty gnarly looking plants, all right? Giant equisetums in Calamates grew to over 100 feet tall. So those little equisetums, you saw that guy standing in front there? Those things, they're about a foot across in the fossil record and super huge. All right? What's going on there? Okay? How come we lost those plants? Now we have ones that look a lot like them. The little equisetums are considered living fossils. All right? Let's crank those little living fossils up with CO2, see what goes down. All right. Again, what you need is a greenhouse, all right? Pump it full. There's ways of getting CO2. I've got some greenhouse stuff now. There's lots of ways people crank CO2 into things. And again, some of you farmers, if you have greenhouses, you know all about this stuff, all right? Now, you could get a bunch of high schoolers going, but you know, that's probably not the most efficient way to increase the CO2. There's lots of ways to do it. And I would like to start with somebody who has a greenhouse that's already got it kicked up. Put some of these insects in there that won't destroy their plants and see what goes down, all right? Because even if you crank it up 3 or 4 times the level today, that should be interesting, isn't it? Or it should be. All right, they have CO2 monitors, all these sorts of things. So it's already there, okay? Just waiting for somebody to put together. I'm poor, don't have a greenhouse, all right? This kind of thing. I need to probably write some of this up in a paper. I did it as a presentation. They weren't taking papers at the time. I'm going to try and put it in the Creation Research Society quarterly or something like that and let other people, you know, this would be a good thing for a Christian college who does a lot of stuff on this, you know. We could put together some experiments, and I think it would be surprising just based on what I showed you, all right? I think this would be fun. Okay, carbon dioxide supplementation. There's actually articles on how to do this stuff. All right, pick up your plants, check the CO2 science log, be ready, get your insect. That's probably what I'd like to do more is the bugs. I really like bugs. All right, where can you go for more information on this? And again, a lot of these sites are not Christian, but they're talking about this stuff. And as Christians, we can use our minds, use what other people talk about. Now, this book I've just stumbled across recently, Fossil Future. This guy is not a Christian, but he talks more Christian about some of these aspects of things than any Christian I know, all right? The Cornwall Alliance is a Christian guy, okay, and he's got a lot of information on this. But this guy's main thing is human flourishing would require more use of oil, coal, and natural gas. That's the opposite of what everybody's saying today. Now, guess what that would do? Put a whole lot more CO2 into the air too, wouldn't it? All right? What's made us so nice now in the 21st century as opposed to our ancestors in, say, the 1850s. When they came to church, what would they be doing? All right? Well, they come in a covered wagon, right? We'd have gas lamps, maybe gas lamps. All right? We'd have windows. When it got cold, we would freeze unless we built a fire. All right? They didn't come in SUVs and all these fancy cars that we have that are climate controlled either. They were riding behind horses. Okay? Horses smell. Okay? They drop poop all over. I've got another talk where I talk about the world 100 years ago, what it was like. And, you know, in the early 1920s even, they still had dead horses in the street, all this kind of stuff. All right? I think nobody's that old here, all right, to remember some of that. But then electrification came in, and all of a sudden you had, you know, primitive washing machines, but washing machines nevertheless, irons, all this stuff. It changed the way we did house, all right? You didn't have to take the carpet out and beat it anymore. Somebody invented a thing that beat it for you, and a little thing called a vacuum cleaner, all right? And then you've got the laundry stuff, all right? Washing machines and all this. You know, you had to bang that stuff before and rub it on a washboard. Some of you might have done it as a kid, okay? I remember my mom had a washboard built into the double basin sink, and we would put it in the washing machine, and then we'd have to run it through the wringer. That wasn't so long ago. That was the 60s, all right? This, I think, is a very interesting book. Now, I've got it on digital, and I've been trying to get it on a form. We were just calling all afternoon to see if it was locally, because part of what I'm going to talk about on Saturday relates to this. You know, the idea that everything is, you know, what about our energy? Where do we get all this from? How do we use it? How should we think about energy? I think he has a great idea in that we want energy that uses human flourishing. After all, where did all this oil come from? Yeah, the flood, huh? All these dead animals, some of it got cooked, the plants did, coal. Some of it's animals, they got cooked in the right kind of way, and we're pumping it out of the ground. We're fighting wars over this stuff that's pumped out of the ground from dead animals, all right? And we know it takes oil to do, I mean, our big machines now can do a lot for us, but if they don't have gas, they're not going anywhere, right? Okay, and there's been, like, for instance, with natural gas, which is really cheap, there's been a push by some administrations that they want to get rid of that, okay? Everything's going to be electrified, and we're going to do it with solar and wind. Good luck with that, all right? We're going to talk about that on Saturday, wherever I'm speaking. I don't know. I just get in the car and Ontario. Canada? No, oh, all right. Oh, Washington. Oregon. Oh, that's almost like, that's a different world. Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, I lived on the left coast for a long time. That's why I'm living in Kentucky right now, all right? Because California got too crazy. As I left, they outlawed gas-powered lawnmowers. You know how many people have gas-powered lawnmower, you know, mowing people's grass? Oh, my goodness. They outlawed, all the bacon had to be free range. You couldn't keep pigs in pens or something like that. Okay, that one really got somebody. All right, yeah, because you know, that was cruel and inhuman. Well, they're pigs. But anyway, they're not human beings. And don't get me started. I'm sorry, that's another hour. Okay? So, yeah, we'll be talking about this. Now, this is a hard thing. People don't talk like him. In fact, when he talks like that, they want to stone him. All right? But he's smart. He's got on his side, he's got facts and things that he brings forward. And says, look, do you really want to do that? Because this is what happened. Solar's going to give us, you know, and wind's going to give us all the power we need. And he's got the stats on that. It doesn't work, all right? What happens when the wind starts blowing? You fire up the gas-powered plant, all right? Okay, I hope this was useful to you and maybe interesting, because you guys are farmers and understand this somewhat better than everybody else. I'm going to turn it back to our hosts.